The word struck me harder than the cold slap of winter air after a warm bath. I hadn't even taken a full step off the stone path into Daniel's backyard before they reached Mess Harp, unfiltered and spoken as though I were already gone. "I'm serious, babe," said a woman's voice, too casual, too cruel. "She's just a burden. Why is she even still alive?" I stood frozen behind the flowering dogwood tree, a casserole dish trembling in my hands. My heart, this old, resilient heart, didn't race. It cracked. I hadn't seen my son in 3 months. And now, after days of summoning the courage to surprise him on his birthday, I found myself rooted in place, eavesdropping on my own eulogy, alive, but ghosted by blood. I adjusted my grip on the dish and stepped forward. "Oh, Mom," Daniel stammered. His wife, Haley, stiffened beside him, her red wine glass caught halfway to her lips. "I thought I'd drop this off. I know you like chicken pot pie," I said, my voice steady like the porch light that never flickers no matter how hard the storm rages. An awkward silence hung between us. Haley recovered first. "How thoughtful," she said, her smile tight as a stretched balloon ready to pop. "You should have texted. I wanted to surprise you," I replied, meeting her eyes without blinking. I placed the dish on the patio table and turned to Daniel. "Happy birthday, son." He looked older than I remembered, not just in the lines around his eyes, but in the heaviness of someone who'd let go of something he once held dear. "Thanks, Mom. That's really kind." That word again. Kind. Not loved. Not missed. Kind. It wasn't always this way. Years ago, Daniel used to run down the stairs barefoot just to hug me before I left for my overnight shift. We used to build pillow forts, pretend the living room was a spaceship, make pancakes shaped like elephants. I taught him how to tie his shoes, how to shave without nicking his chin. I stayed up through fevers, school plays, heartbreaks. I gave him my all, every scrap of energy, every ounce of love. And now, he looked at me like I was something left behind in the rain. Damp. Inconvenient. "Mom," he said, clearing his throat, "we're actually about to sit down to dinner. Maybe we could catch up later this week." A dismissal, but said politely, as if kindness could clean a wound made by rejection. "I won't keep you," I said, turning toward the gate. "Enjoy your evening." Haley's voice followed me as I walked away. "You really should tell her. It's not fair to keep stringing this along." My hands tightened into fists at my sides. I kept walking. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. It creaked with each rotation, the sound louder than my own thoughts. They hadn't changed the sheets since I moved into the small guest house behind their home. Beige, bland, clean. No photos. No warmth. Just four walls and a silence that pressed too hard against my ribs. I remembered my late husband, Edward, once whispering, "No matter how far they go, they'll always need their mother." He was wrong. I had become unnecessary. The next morning, I didn't bring coffee inside like I usually did. I didn't prune the hydrangeas or offer to fold Haley's laundry. I stayed in the guest house. I cooked my own breakfast and kept the blinds closed. I waited. By evening, Daniel came knocking. "Mom, can we talk?" I opened the door and gestured for him to sit. He hesitated before taking the chair opposite mine. "I want to explain what Haley said," he began. "You don't have to," I interrupted gently. "I heard enough." He rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he'd picked up from his father. "She's under a lot of stress. Work, the kids, and we've been talking about downsizing." "You mean," I said, "getting rid of me?" "No, that's not." He stopped, looking helpless. "It's complicated." "No, Daniel. It's simple. You want your life. She wants space. And I'm the extra chair at the table." He looked ashamed, but not enough. "I didn't ask to move in with you," I said. "After your father died, I sold the house. I only came because you insisted, because you said, 'You'll always have a place with us, Mom.' I believed you." Daniel's face twisted with guilt. "I meant it. But people change. Needs change." "I haven't changed," I said. "I still remember your allergies. Your favorite meals. I remember the name of every teacher you ever had. I still fold your socks the way you like. I haven't changed." We sat in silence. He looked at his hands. "I'll move out," I said finally. "I'll find a place." "You don't have to." "I do," I said firmly. "You want freedom, Daniel. So do I." The next morning, I called an old friend named Martha. We used to volunteer together at the library before I moved in with Daniel. "I have a spare room," she said without hesitation, and a garden that needs loving hands. 2 weeks later, I left Daniel's house without fanfare. He helped me load the last box into the car. We hugged. It felt like hugging a coat rack. "You'll call me?" he asked. "Of course," I replied. But I didn't. At Martha's, I found something I didn't know I'd been missing. Laughter. I sat on her porch drinking tea, swapping stories about our wild younger days. I played Scrabble again. I took up painting. I volunteered at the community center. I taught little kids how to write their names. I smiled without forcing it. One afternoon, while trimming Martha's roses, she said, "You've got fire in you still, Evelyn. They don't see it, but I do." I believed her. A month after I moved out, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom," he said, "I miss you. So do the kids. Haley, she wants to talk. Maybe we could start over." But by then, I'd already started over. I stared at the phone, then put it down and returned to the roses. Because some words, once heard, can't be unheard. And some silences, once broken, never fully heal. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a burden. I was Evelyn. And I was alive. Still alive. And I didn't leave. 3 months passed like the steady unfolding of a winter thaw, slow, reluctant, but undeniable. With each day, I felt myself becoming more than just a shadow on someone else's wall. At Martha's, I was a person again, not a duty. I was seen. One Saturday morning, I walked into the community center to volunteer at the senior literacy program. The place was humming with quiet conversation, pages rustling, pens scratching across worksheets. Most of the participants were older folks like me, folks who'd worked all their lives but never had the chance to learn to read or write properly. I found a seat beside Henry, a retired mechanic with crooked fingers and a laugh that could shake the dust off the rafters. We were working through a simple word recognition sheet when he looked up and said, "You're good at this, Evelyn. Ever been a teacher?" "No," I smiled. "But I was a mother. That counts for something." He chuckled, then paused. "You still close with your kids?" I hesitated, then gave the smallest shake of my head. "Not like we used to be." Henry nodded slowly. "Mine too. They call on holidays, send gift cards. But that's not love. That's obligation wrapped in glitter." I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, felt understood without needing to explain. That evening, Martha and I made lentil stew and watched the fire crackle in the hearth. She passed me a cup of hot tea and said, "You've come back to life here, Evie. I hope you know that." I looked around her cozy homemy new home and felt something stir in my chest that I hadn't felt since before Edward passed. Belonging. But even peace can be fragile. The next week, I received a letter. Real paper, real ink. From Daniel. The handwriting was familiar, but the words felt foreign. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I've listened to that voicemail 100 times, and each time it cuts deeper. Haley and I have been going to counseling. She's been trying to understand the weight of what she said. I know it's no excuse. The kids miss you. Lily asks why Grandma doesn't visit anymore. I tell her you're busy, but she doesn't buy it. She remembers your cookies. She remembers how you used to braid her hair. Please, let us see you again. Love, Daniel." I folded the letter and placed it on the nightstand. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply sat with it. The next day, I went for a walk. The air was sharp and clean, and the sound of birds overhead reminded me that life was moving, always moving. I stopped at the playground near the school and watched the children running, shrieking, chasing clouds. I remembered Daniel at that age, cheeks flushed, arms swinging wide. I used to chase him across these very fields. A little girl ran up to me, out of breath. "Are you someone's grandma?" she asked, beaming. "I suppose I am," I said softly. "You want to push me on the swing?" So I did. And for that hour, I was just a woman and a child, unburdened by past wrongs. That night, I reread Daniel's letter. By the third read, I picked up a pen. "Daniel, I'm glad you're trying. That matters. But I need time. I found something here that I didn't know I was missing. I'm not angry anymore, just tired. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine. Tell Lily I think of her. Tell her I still remember the lavender ribbons she liked in her hair. With love, Mom." I mailed it the next morning. Weeks passed, then months. Spring came in soft gusts and bursts of color. Martha and I joined a gardening club. I started a book club for women over 60. We met every other Tuesday and drank wine and argued about endings that didn't make sense. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Then one afternoon, while browsing a secondhand shop, I heard a voice that made my breath hitch. Grandma. I turned. It was Lily, 7 years old now, taller, her hair still in those lavender ribbons. Behind her, Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, Haley at his side. My heart wavered, but my body moved first. Hi, sweetheart, I said, kneeling. You've gotten so big. She hugged me before I could say another word. Daniel stepped forward. His eyes were glassy. We didn't know you'd be here. I come here on Thursdays, I replied, standing slowly. Looking for forgotten treasures. Haley nodded. Seems we found one. There was no venom in her tone, just softness. Regret. I'm sorry, she said. For what I said. For everything after. I looked at her, really looked. She was thinner, tired, but honest. Words have weight, I said. But people can change. Daniel stepped forward, hands out. Can we try again? Not move you back and just. Come to dinner? Let the kids see you. I looked at Lily, her arms wrapped tight around my waist. Okay, I said quietly. But this time on my terms. That Sunday, I went to their house for dinner. The same backyard. Same dogwood tree. But this time, I brought no casserole. Only myself. Inside, the table was set with care. Haley had cooked a roast. Daniel poured wine. Lily showed me her drawings. The younger one, Max, sat on my lap and fell asleep with a thumb in his mouth. No one said anything cruel. No one whispered behind my back. We ate. We laughed. And though it wasn't perfect, it was a start. At the end of the evening, Daniel walked me to the car. I know we may never go back to how it was, he said. But I want to earn my way forward. I nodded. Then keep showing up. He hugged me tight. Tighter than I expected. Thank you for not leaving, he whispered. I pulled back, looked into his eyes. I did leave, I said, but only to remember who I was. I drove home to Martha's that night with a full belly and a heart that felt untangled. The next morning, I sat by the window with my tea, watching the first light touch the garden. Martha joined me in her robe, yawning. You went, she said, sipping from her mug. I did, I nodded. And I came back. You always do, she smiled. You're a tough old bird. I laughed. I guess I am. She leaned her head on my shoulder. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to remember I existed. I knew I did. And I mattered. Because I had chosen myself. Later that week, I got a phone call from the community center director, Mr. Finley. He said they needed someone to organize a new outreach program or reading mentorship for underprivileged teens who had dropped out of school. Evelyn, he said, you have a gift for making people feel seen. We need that. I hesitated. For years, I'd lived under someone else's roof, someone else's expectations. Now, someone was asking me to lead something, to step forward. I'd be honored, I said. The program began the following Monday. I was given a dusty back room with mismatched chairs and a box of used books. My first class had only 3 teens, 2 boys, and 1 girl. They slouched in their seats, faces bored, eyes guarded. Before we begin, I said, standing before them, you should know I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to remind you that you're not broken. The girl, Tanya, raised an eyebrow. You don't even know us. I don't have to, I replied. I know what it's like to be overlooked. By the end of the hour, we'd laughed twice and argued once. It was a start. Over the next few weeks, more students trickled in. Word spread. I brought snacks. I printed handouts. I asked questions they weren't used to being asked. What makes you proud? What do you dream about? Who told you you couldn't? They wrote essays that made me cry. They drew pictures that told stories deeper than their words. They showed up, and I showed up for them. One afternoon, after class, Tanya lingered behind. You remind me of my grandma, she said, eyes downcast. Before she got sick, she believed in me. She still does, I said, even if you can't hear it right now. She nodded slowly, then left. I sat in that empty room for a long time, thinking about how we never really stop mothering. We just do it for different people, in different ways. That evening, Daniel texted me again. Daniel, can we take you to dinner this Friday? Just us. No kids. I stared at the message. A few months ago, I might have cried. Now, I simply sat with it, thoughtful. Me. Only if I get to choose the restaurant. He replied with a thumbs up and a heart. Friday came, and I wore my navy blue dress, the one Edward had always loved. Daniel picked me up in a rented car, cleaner than his usual one. Haley sat in the front seat, turned around to smile at me. It wasn't forced. It was tentative, hopeful. We went to a quiet bistro with dim lighting and jazz playing softly in the background. They asked questions this time, real ones. About my class, about my book club, about my new friendships. They listened. Halfway through the meal, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I wanted to show you something," he said, sliding it across the table. Inside was a photograph, old, faded, of me, holding baby Daniel on the front steps of our first home. I was laughing. He was reaching for my face. "I found it cleaning out the garage," he said. "I'd forgotten how young you were." "I was 21, I said softly. I didn't know anything except how much I loved him. Haley cleared her throat. "We've been talking about what family means, what we've done wrong, and what we can do right." They exchanged a glance. "I can't promise we'll never mess up again," Haley said. "But I can promise that we're done pretending like you're invisible." I nodded, emotion thick in my throat. That's all I ever wanted. Later, after they dropped me off, I stood at Martha's front gate for a long time, watching the taillights disappear into the dark. I didn't feel torn between two lives. I felt grounded in both. Inside, Martha was knitting by the fire. "You smell like wine and closure," she said, grinning. "I think I might finally be at peace," I replied. She patted the seat next to her. "Well then, sit down and help me untangle this mess. You're better with knots than I am." I sat beside her, picked up the yarn, and began to work it gently between my fingers. "You know," I said, "for a long time, I thought my worth depended on how much my family needed me. Now I realize I matter even when they don't." Martha smiled. "That's the secret, Evie. You found yourself again, and no one gets to take that away." I nodded, the firelight dancing in my eyes. Outside, the wind shifted. Spring was giving way to summer, and for the first time in years, I didn't dread the season ahead. I welcomed it, because I had roots now, and they weren't planted in anyone else's soil but my own. The summer unfolded in layers of light and warmth. The garden behind Martha's house was in full bloom, roses the color of sunset, lilacs that made the breeze smell like childhood. Every morning, I walked among the blossoms barefoot, coffee in hand, toes curling into dew-kissed grass. I was 77, and for the first time in decades, I felt younger than my bones. One Saturday morning, Martha handed me a flyer. "Community talent show. They want elders to participate this year." I raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly is my talent supposed to be?" "Living," she said with a wink. "But maybe something less existential. You still play piano?" I hadn't touched a piano in years. Not since Edward's funeral. But music had once been mine, long before marriage, before diapers, before I became just mom. I pulled open the old chest in the guest room and found my sheet music, brittle with age. My fingers trembled as I traced the faded notes of Clair de Lune. That night, I practiced until my wrists ached. The talent show was Modesta fold-out stage behind the community center, string lights overhead, rows of plastic chairs filled with faces both familiar and curious. I wore a deep emerald blouse, one Edward once bought me on our anniversary. I sat at the piano and took a deep breath. When the first note floated into the air, something inside me broke open and then mended in the same breath. I wasn't Evelyn the widow or Evelyn the burden. I was Evelyn the musician, Evelyn the woman, Evelyn who endured. After the performance, people clapped. Some stood. One woman cried. Daniel and Haley were there too, sitting with Lily and Max in the front row. Haley's eyes shimmered with something I hadn't seen before, not guilt. Reverence. Later that evening, Lily climbed onto my lap. "Grandma, you're famous," she whispered. I laughed. "Only in zip code 90814. Haley leaned over. "Thank you for letting us come. You didn't have to." "I wanted you there," I replied. "But not because I needed your approval. Because I wanted to show you who I still am." Haley nodded slowly. "I see that now." From then on, they came by more often, sometimes just to bring pie, other times just to talk. The visits weren't out of obligation anymore. They were tender, unscripted, real. One warm afternoon in July, Daniel asked if I wanted to come with them to Lake Arrowhead. A small cabin, a few days by the water. The cabin was modest but lovely, surrounded by pine trees, the lake sparkling like liquid glass. Lily skipped rocks. Max chased dragonflies. I sat on the porch with Haley, sipping iced tea. I used to think motherhood was a finish line, she said. You raise them, then rest. I smiled. No such thing. It's more like a river. Keeps flowing. Changes shape. Sometimes it floods. She looked over at me. Do you ever regret it? All you gave up. The question hung in the warm air. Yes, I said honestly. Sometimes I do. But regret doesn't mean I'd choose differently. It just means I know how much it cost. Haley nodded, her eyes glistening. I wish I'd understood that sooner. So do I said. But you're here now. That's what matters. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the pines, we roasted marshmallows around a fire pit. Daniel played guitar softly, Max asleep against his shoulder. Lily braided my hair with clumsy fingers. I closed my eyes and let myself belong. The next morning, I woke early and walked down to the water alone. I slipped off my shoes and stood ankle-deep in the cool lake. The reflection staring back at me was wrinkled, weathered but strong. Still here. Still alive. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to the universe for giving me this unexpected chapter. That autumn, something unexpected happened. Mr. Finley from the community center called again. This time, with a bigger ask. "Evelyn, the city's launching an initiative for elder engagement workshops, lectures, mentorship programs. We want you to lead it." I nearly dropped the phone. Me? Lead the entire program? You've changed lives, Evelyn. And you've done it quietly, humbly. But people are noticing. I accepted. The position came with a small stipend, a lot of work, and even more joy. I built teams of volunteers. I designed workshops on resilience, storytelling, and grief. I brought in speakers, some elderly, some young, who reminded our community that wisdom doesn't age out. We called the program Rooted. During our launch event, I stood before a crowd of nearly 200 people. Daniel was there. So was Haley. Even Martha, who wore a red feather boa and clapped louder than anyone. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the audience and let my heart lead. I spent a long time thinking I had reached the end of my usefulness. I began. After I lost my husband. After I moved in with my son. After I overheard something I can never unhear. I thought my story had ended. I paused. But what I've learned is that stories don't end when others stop reading them. They end when we stop writing them. A quiet hush swept through the room. We are not just the people we used to be. We are who we decide to become next. Applause rose around me. Not for perfection, but for truth. That night, as we cleaned up the last of the folding chairs, Daniel approached me. "I never told you this," he said, voice low. "But the day you left, I cried in Max's room for an hour. Not because I was afraid you were gone, but because I knew you deserved better than what we gave." I looked at him for a long moment. "I needed to leave to remember myself," I said. "But I'm grateful I came back." He nodded, then pulled me into a hug. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. This time I believed him. At home, I placed the event program beside my bed. I looked around at the room filled with books, photos, knitted blankets, and laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen where Martha hummed to herself. My life wasn't what I'd expected at 77. It was better, because I didn't leave. December arrived quietly, blanketing the town in a stillness that reminded me of old hymns. The garden had gone to sleep. Even the roses, so proud in summer, bowed their thorned heads in rest. Martha and I spent our evenings with spice cider, knitting scarves for the shelter, and listening to Nat King Cole play softly from the radio. But silence doesn't mean the world has stopped. It just breathes slower. One snowy afternoon, I got a call from Tanya, the sharp, guarded girl from my literacy class. "I got accepted," she blurted out without greeting. "Community college. Full scholarship." My heart swelled. "You did that," she added, her voice cracking. "You believed in me when no one else did." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You earned it, sweetheart. All I did was hold the mirror up so you could see yourself." After we hung up, I sat by the window, staring out at the frost-laced trees. Somewhere between the brokenness of last year and the healing of this one, I had become someone new. Not a replacement for the mother I used to be, but a fuller version. A woman rebuilt. That night, Daniel came by alone. "Walk with me," he asked, standing in the cold with his collar turned up, cheeks red from the wind. We walked down the street in silence. The snow crunched underfoot. Christmas lights blinked softly from front porches. "I've been thinking a lot," he finally said, "about legacies." I turned to him. That's a big word for someone who once threw a tantrum over broken Legos. He chuckled. Fair. But seriously, I've spent so much time chasing promotions, building equity, doing all the things the world tells us we should do. And I keep coming back to you. Me? I asked, surprised. You've built more legacy than any CEO I know. Look at your students. The way people at the center light up when you walk in. The way Lily talks about you like you invented the moon. I didn't know what to say, so I listened. I want to do something, he continued. With you. Something that lasts. Like what? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thin folder. I filed the paperwork. I want to start a nonprofit. A place where elderly women like you, well, not you, but you know, can mentor at-risk youth. Teach. Share. Be seen. I opened the folder. Inside was a draft mission statement, rough logo sketches, and at the top of the page, the Evelyn Project. I blinked back tears. You named it after me? Because you're the blueprint, he said. You reminded me that worth doesn't age. That love doesn't expire. I closed the folder slowly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me build it, he said. I nodded, tears rolling silently down my cheek. Yes, Daniel. I will. In the months that followed, the Evelyn Project became more than an idea. It became real. We held meetings in library basements, applied for grants, recruited volunteers, many of them women from my book club, knitting circle, and literacy group. We paired elders with teens, one-on-one mentorships, workshops, cooking classes, career talks, even dance nights. Martha taught sewing. Tanya came back to lead a writing group. Henry from the literacy class, now proudly reading at a third-grade level, volunteered to fix up donated bikes for kids who couldn't afford bus fare. It was magic. One afternoon, as I walked through the main hall, I saw a 13-year-old boy sitting with Agnes, a retired nurse. They were bent over a book, laughing. Not just smiling, laughing. I stopped in my tracks. That, I thought, is what healing looks like. News spread. The local paper did a story. Then the regional. Then NPR came calling. At 78, I did my first radio interview. What do you hope people take away from this? The host asked me live on air. That no one is useless, I said. No one is past their prime. We just forget to look beyond the surface. Back at home, my phone rang for days. Former students, neighbors, even estranged relatives. But there was one message that mattered most. It came late one night from Haley. Haley, I've been afraid to say this for a long time. But I was wrong. Deeply, painfully wrong. I let fear turn me cruel. You didn't deserve that. I'm so sorry. I stared at the message for a long time, then replied, Me. We all have chapters we wish we could rewrite. But the story's not over yet. From that point on, Haley began calling weekly. Sometimes just to chat. Other times, to ask for advice about the kids, her own parents, even her marriage. We weren't best friends, but we were something real, something new. One day in spring, Daniel surprised me. We're taking a trip, he said. Just us. He drove me up the coast to a small inn overlooking the ocean. The same town Edward and I had honeymooned in 55 years ago. That evening, we walked the shore. I told him stories I'd never shared before about my childhood, my dreams before I became a wife and mother, the poems I used to write in the margins of cookbooks. I had no idea, Daniel said. You never asked. I replied, not bitterly, just honestly. He nodded. Then I'm asking now. Everything. Tell me everything. So I did. And under that moonlit sky, mother and son finally saw each other clearly, no longer through the lens of need or duty, but of truth. As the waves kissed the shore, I whispered, Thank you. For what? For showing up, I said. He didn't speak, just took my hand and held it. Years passed. The Evelyn Project grew. We opened 3 more branches. Tanya became its director. Lily entered college and asked if she could intern for a summer. Because I want to do what you do, Grandma, she said. I want to matter. At 82, my hair silver, my bones stubborn, I sat in the audience as Lily stood on stage at a national conference and spoke about legacy, about connection, about the first time she saw me play the piano and realized old didn't mean gone. I used to think my grandma was just old, she said. Now I know she's the strongest woman I've ever met. I cried that night, but not out of sadness. I had lived long enough to become not just a witness, but a catalyst. Long enough to see the things that broke me become the very pieces that built something new. And I had stayed. Through the pain. Through the silence. through the question that once haunted me. Why is she even still alive? Now, the answer was clear. Because I still had something to give. Because real love takes time to bloom. Because some roots grow deepest after the storm. Because I wasn't done yet. And I never left.